Need to throw
Oh,
that up there.
yes. That'd be
So,
good.
well, Playmakers, welcome back to the live edition of me and Mike's show, Working the Wire. I am your host, Big Play Blake. You can follow me on Twitter at Big Play Blake. The man, as I just mentioned, to my left, your right, the advocate for avocado toast, the sultan of social distancing, the front man for proper face coverings, Big Play Beats. We're back live, buddy. How you
Oh,
feeling?
I feel great to be live, but I'm a ball of nerves here. I'm winning by 1.08 points in an IDP league, so I'm basically a stat correction away from losing. So I'm just like every second I'm hoping that it just holds on and nothing gets turned over. But I mean, the live part of this has got me just straight juiced up.
I was gonna say, man, you strike me as a guy that likes to do it, go back, edit, play around with things. You don't strike me as a guy that likes to throw off the, go off the cuff. You
Oh
strike me
no,
as a guy with a plan, Michael.
I like to have a plan. So this has got me stressed, man. I want to just be set it, forget it, have a good plan, and not have to alter from it. Yes.
Well, that's all right. Well, we'll do our best here for you guys. Actually, we'll start with a bit of breaking news, Mike, before we even get into the show. Le'Veon Bell released by the New York Jets. Immediate reaction.
What a dumpster fire! They got rid of the wrong guy, in my opinion.
Jets are
Adam,
terrible. But we'll get into some of the stuff going on in the NFL this week, guys. Like I said, welcome to the Working the Wire podcast. It is Tuesday, October 13th. Mike, we're almost to Halloween, buddy.
yes.
It's coming fast and furious.
Are
But
you cool with wearing costumes early?
define wear costumes early.
Like next Friday.
Like, am I wearing it around the house, or what am I doing?
I don't know. Maybe if in a non-COVID year you're going to a party, it's like 2-3 weeks early. Is that okay?
I mean, yeah. I mean, whenever your Halloween party's scheduled for, that's why
Okay.
you bought the damn thing.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Does it? I was asking because of our holiday conversations of the past, where you're not an early.
Oh, this
guy.
has nothing to do with that. Stop
Okay.
it.
This is different.
But Mike,
Okay.
speaking of reasons why, I figured since we're doing our first live show here, we would get into what brought you and I into the wonderful world of fantasy football, my friend. And I'll start. We talked about it a little bit on the Big Play podcast last fall during football season. Obviously, we gave our week to week locks, things like that. But we talked a little bit about our history. So just to inform those who may be joining us for the first time, I myself, my dad, Big Play Ed, he actually started fantasy football before I was born. So we're talking late 80s here, Mike. My old man saw the idea in the back of I think it was a Sporting News back then. I'd have to have him comment and tell me what the actual publication was. But fantasy football back then was on the back, an idea on the back of a magazine. So him and 7 buddies said, hey, let's give it a shot. Sounds fun. Here we are 33 years later. I think that league just celebrated its 33rd year this year, if you can believe it. Here we are. And it's been a household addiction in my family. I play it. My dad plays it. My sister and my mother even play fantasy football now, if you can believe it.
I can.
So we are a family of fantasy football players. I myself started back in '99 playing. My dad actually created that league back in the late '80s. Then he started another one in the early '90s. And then in '99, I was just a kid, 10 years old, I think. He started a third league to basically give me my introduction into running my own team. I had been going to drafts with him for years, hosting him at our house, going to his buddies' houses, wherever the draft was. I tagged along, fell in love with it. I was already in love with the game of football, but this gave me a little bit more of a connection to the pro game. So, like I said, Mike, I just celebrated my 20th year last year of playing fantasy football. So it's been a very long time, something I've invested a lot of time and money into over the years. What about you, buddy? What got you involved with fantasy football?
Truthfully, it's just I love watching football as a college player, and then I love the aspect of the stats, the data, and then you get together with your friends. There's nothing better than a live draft in person. You drink beers, you eat, you have a good old time, and you hope you don't screw it up by getting too drunk early. But no, and I'm in 5 or 6 leagues each year. I love every second of it. I somewhat complain about having to cheer against my own guys, but at the end of the day, I'm just excited to have another reason to watch a football game. So I live there. I'm similar to you though. I've got one with my family. We try to be quirky and eccentric in that one. I've got ones with my friends that's really competitive, but at the same time we do really interesting things like the Royal Rumble draft. selection and just things like that where we have great commissioner. So for me, it's all about having a good time and watching football.
And Mike, that was the next question I was going to ask is what's the quirkiest thing you do in your fantasy leagues? And you talked about this before when we did the Big Play podcast. Tell the playmakers a little bit about how you guys pick your draft order every year.
So it can vary each year, but the one thing we've done that's kind of held so far is we have a commissioner, Rob, and he does an amazing job, but he creates each one of us in like the WWE wrestling games. And then also
the video game.
Yes, the video games. And then also gives us random wrestlers and does a Royal Rumble, and we watch it. And that determines the draft order. It was something that he got from a part of my my bachelor party where we were just getting after it. And it was like one of the drinking games for our beer Olympics. And we watched an old Royal Rumble, and that was just how you placed. Like each person pulled a random number, and that's who you got as coming into the event, and that's how you placed. So we got that, and it's been each year something new, something different. And he's always trying to outdo himself, and he does a really good job. And that one's really interesting. And then my family league, if you win the league, you get to make a rule the next year. So some people just pick their own draft order, things like that. Other people like make us have to have weird team names, or we actually my one brother decided he didn't like partial points, so now we actually have a lot of ties in that league. It's really annoying. Ties are annoying, I'll say that. But yeah. What about
That's
you?
interesting.
Anything quirky?
Yeah, so actually, my dad's leagues, his 3 leagues, and hell, some of those guys may even tune in tonight so I can help them beat me this week. My dad's 3 leagues are pretty cut and dry. Pay your league dues. Money's split 3 ways at the end of the year. See you next year, right? But my father-in-law actually here, not this past year, but the year before, he said, "Hey, you always talk about this fantasy football stuff. I want in. How do I get involved?"
Okay.
My mom also, same thing, wanted to get involved. So in lieu of trying to get them into a league with a bunch of sharks, right, I started a league with them, my brother-in-law. My sister had her own team for the first time. She had done a joint team with my brother-in-law. And I started a 3rd league, and we actually play for a WWE. It's funny you brought up wrestling. We play for a WWE-style belt that we all pitched in on. So instead of doing league fees, we all pitched in on this belt. I think it was one of the undisputedbelts.com belts, but it's got our league logo on the front. It actually comes with plates on the side, so you can actually see who won it each year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Unfortunately, my sisters won it the first 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, beat me in the championship the first year, oddly enough. And then here's the craziest thing, Mike. It was Big Play Sue and my sister in the championship last season.
Wow.
So it was an all my family championship, and I wasn't involved. So nuts. Yeah. But Mike, speaking of things that are nuts, let's cover some NFL headlines from this week in 3 and Out. Mike, the first story, and I think you would agree it was the biggest news this week, came on Sunday, where just a gruesome injury, left Dak Prescott down with a compound fracture and dislocation in his ankle, not too dissimilar from the injury I had a couple years ago. We won't get into that. But Mike, I'll start. I was pretty fired up about this on Twitter. If you guys follow me on Twitter, the Joneses, Steven and Jerry, sorry fellas, you're assholes. This man should have been paid last year. Mike, let me educate you here with a few stats. Dak Prescott in 2019, and I tweeted these out the other day. 4th in passing touchdowns, 2nd in passing yards, 4th in QBR, and he was 14th worst in interceptions. So almost bottom half of the league in interceptions, right?
Yeah.
Take a wild guess what the average annual salary is of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. The top 5, most valuable contracts. What's the average? What do you think?
I'll go $28 million.
Over $37 million.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
Dak Prescott
he's the 4th QBR?
Offers, and he had the 4th QBR from last season. Turned down deals around $35 million. That was the immediate response I got on Twitter was, hey, this guy turned down $35 million. How can you blame the Joneses? That's why I can blame the Joneses. Dak Prescott last year proved that he's here he belongs here. He proves he's a top 5 quarterback. The thing, Mike, that I think maybe grossed me out the most on Sunday wasn't even the injury. If you were watching the pregame show for Sunday Night Football, Tony Dungy said that the injury was a blessing in disguise for the Cowboys offense, saying that it's going to make them revert back to running the football.
Yeah.
Old man, get off my TV.
Yeah.
I don't care if you've worn a Maslin Tigers polo before. I don't care.
Yeah.
So,
The timing, how terrible, right?
oh, it's the worst. I mean, this is exactly why guys like him, and don't get me wrong, I don't like what Earl Thomas did a couple years ago when he flipped off the Seahawks sideline. But this is why these guys want these contracts. They want that assurance that if something like this happens, they're taken care of. And now, who knows what the future holds? Stephen Jones says Dak's still their future, but who knows, Mike? I mean, if he's not able to play into next season, whatever the case may be, trust me, I know from personal experience this injury is awful. I mean, I didn't walk for 3 months. It's brutal. So I'm not convinced that he's the long-term solution there, especially after this, and how they jerked him around all last season.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you just can't help but feel for the guy, right? Like you saw the way his teammates, other members of NFL teams, analysts, everyone that has had contact with him, like they've reached out, they've spoken super highly of the guy. I mean, that part of it's actually heartwarming to see how these guys who compete in a very physical, violent game came out in support of him. And then the other thing I really tried to stay positive on is I love how his brother is actively keeping his spirits high. He's talking about being the comeback player of the year and the MVP next year. I really do hope he returns healthy and ready to go for whether it's the Cowboys, somebody else, or whatever. I think everyone's rooting for Dak. It's really nice to see that, like the brotherhood of the NFL, and then truly his brother kind of helped try to lift him up. And what's definitely got to be just an absolutely heart-wrenching time for him.
Yeah, it couldn't have come at a worse time. But speaking of the times, Mike, let's do our weekly NFL COVID-19 update. The league currently has 2 outbreaks on their hands. They got 24 Titans players and members of the staff. They got 4 cases in New England. I don't know if I would classify that as an outbreak, but that's what most pundits are saying. And yesterday, Mike, the league put in they augmented their testing protocols, put in some game day testing for all players, coaches, and staff. Guess the testing is going to take place at the team hotels the morning of.
Yep.
Mike, I'll start with you. Last week, you made it pretty clear you thought this was all going to work out in the end with your consummate optimism as we've grown to know you over the years. And I'm starting to side with you a little bit. I like the idea of there being an 18th week that they're talking about. The thing I want to know is, how do you think the schedule modifications of these 8 teams that have had changes to their schedule, what is it going to make for as far as a fantasy impact?
So fantasy impact, I see several big things. I got about a list of 10 here. I'll go through a couple of them. Look, the Bills and the Chiefs, they don't have to play on a short week now. They're going to play on a Monday. They get to prepare for each other. That's a big game. These are 2 teams that have like serious playoff contentions, Super Bowl possible. So I love that they get to prepare a little bit longer. I want to see, for me, I want to see fantasy just players going off. I want the big scores.
Right.
Then you have the Chargers actually get a bye week in week 6. This actually is key with that injury that happened to Keenan Allen. He had spasms in his back. It was caused by, he said, he got pinched. So having that bye week next week actually really helps them out, because that's another week where you have your star out there and helping out your rookie quarterback. The Dolphins are going to be staying home for 3 weeks, so they should be a little more rested than some of these teams. And on the other end, you have the Steelers basically lose a bye week, and they have to be on the road for 3 weeks in a row. And the reason I say they lose a bye week is that while they didn't play, they still practiced a lot, which is not normal for a bye week. Usually the NFL teams let their players rest for at least 4 days. And then there's teams like, it looks like the AFC North really took a beating. Ravens, so Lamar, they played 5 solid teams in a row, most of them looking like they're playoff contenders. And they would have had a bye week at least after the first one, so I think that hurts. You have teams like the Patriots and Broncos both losing a bye essentially by not getting that week off where they thought they were going to play and it gets canceled that morning. I would talk about the Jets in fantasy relevance, but I just think they suck so much that they really I think this just helps them get Trevor Lawrence more so, because the end of their schedule sucks with all the travel they have. And then you look at the Titans having an early bye week. That's when I'm going to watch for players breaking down. You're going to see the Derrick Henry where he has 200 some touches on the year and he doesn't have that week late in the season off. We've seen Luan, he's gone out 2 weeks in a row. So for me, that's a big issue. They do get 5 of 6 at home down towards of their next games at home, but that means they're basically at home for all of October and most of November. That's a huge perk for them. So I think right now I'm happy about it, but late in the season I'm going to be worried about Titans.
Yeah, no, you're right, Mike. And I kind of alluded to it in a past episode of the show is, I think they're just going to treat these like bye weeks. I don't expect super amounts of disruption. Now, obviously, you're going to have to watch for matchup purposes. But, as far as these major disruptions, I think we're past that. Treat them as they're, any games that are suspended as byes or injuries and move on. So, Mike, speaking of things that have moved on, the Falcons have moved on from Dan Quinn, and GM Thomas Dimitroff also got the axe. These guys, Mike, only a couple years away from, or removed, I should say, from a Super Bowl in which they should have won. We all know what happened. We don't need to go into the whole giving up the game, that whole deal. But Mike, these were guys that really were well respected. 3 years ago? As far as the NFL is concerned, obviously Kyle Shanahan moved on to San Francisco, and different things have happened with the staff since then. But Mike, does this move come at the right time? And if so, are there better days ahead for the likes of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, who have struggled so far this season from a fantasy view?
Yeah, Arthur Blank really struggled with this. He said that publicly. Do I think it's at the right time? I do. Unfortunately, they are probably out of any contention. It's just moral victories and getting things right. It does allow them to get back in the game and try to get the top head coach of their choice a little earlier. They can really start working on that, or kind of having their plan as much as they can without a GM.
Sure.
So Raheem Morris, he takes over as the interim head coach. Look, he's got head coaching experience. So he was in Tampa Bay, and it was a mixed bag there. He started with 3 wins, then he goes to 10, then he has 4, and then he got fired there. I do think a new coach can reinvigorate people. The people I'm thinking about that I don't love this situation for, a banged up Julio Jones. Like, what does he have to prove? Everyone knows who Julio Jones is. So he's going to be a guy I think you see rest a little more, and they're going to play some of these younger guys, find out what they have on the team. I really hope playmakers listen to you, though, Blake. You did say early in the season, if you have them in a dynasty, sell high, get out. And it looks like you're right. In regards to a guy like Matty Ice, I think he's still going to be a middling quarterback. He's a guy you can trust in right matchups. I'd like to see a little more consistency here and push into the top 10, but I still put him in the 14 to 17 range for quarterbacks. So unless you're in a deep league or 2 quarterback league, he's really got to be the right matchup or like a streaming start in terms of fantasy points per game.
Yeah, no, and you hit the nail on the head. And I would still sell Julio right now in a dynasty league. I would sell Matt Ryan too. Yeah. But I think, and we talked a little bit about this last week with the Bill O'Brien firing in Houston, I think a lot of times these moves are made for more of a cultural change, right? So, and sometimes that can spark a team. So hopefully the Falcons can get a spark off that. They're 0-5 to start the season, so it definitely comes, in my opinion, even a week late. We talked about it last week, and I mean, I think Dan Quinn should have been fired last week. So It just depends on the way you look at it. But I think this could be a good move, eventually for Matt Ryan or Julio Jones. So
it looks like
Calvin Ridley should be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we have a couple questions from playmakers out there. We actually get 2. We got Jarvis Landry or Brandon Cooks on Sunday.
Jarvis Landry or Brandon Cooks on Sunday. Well, let's take a look here. I think, let me bring it up.
So do you think Cooks is blow up this week, essentially? Do you think that was how he's going to be, or do you think he's going to be a boomer bust is what I'm worried about there?
I think he's very much a boomer bust. Their offense is going to be predicated on that running game getting going, and it's kind of been hot and cold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not as if they have, really carried any sort of consistency, you know what I mean? So, and to be honest, they're going against the Titans, who are going to be coming off what it looks like is going to be a big win tonight. We're going to be sky high, but they haven't been the best secondary all season long. So I think it really depends on what you're looking at. Obviously, OBJ is going to get the bulk of the coverage from probably Joe Hayden. The Steelers secondary, in my opinion, definitely is better than the Titans. But at that same time, it's like, you start looking at how the game flow, you talk about all the time game flow, right? Mm-hmm. So you start wondering how the game flow is going to go, where I see Houston and Tennessee as more of a track meet, whereas I don't really see this Browns-Steelers game as a track meet. So, in my opinion, I'm going Brandon Cooks.
Yep.
That's a coin flip, but I would lean Cooks.
I don't think you're going to go wrong with either. I think they both have a higher floor this week, but I think Brandon Cooks is the guy who's going to boom a little more than Jarvis. So I think I would play Brandon Cooks there. And then another one from XX True Polar Bear XX. Would you rather have Antonio Gibson or Myles Gaskin? Dynasty or right now is what I want to know. In a dynasty, I think I want Antonio Gibson. I think he's showing some upside. Right now, I want Myles Gaskin. I think you've known I picked him as a lock a few weeks ago. I like how he catches the ball out of the backfield, and Miami is using him as a workhorse. He is getting 10-plus touches a day. So I currently, right now, I'm going Myles Gaskin there.
I think going into this week, they're both, oddly enough, the two running backs you just gave us both play the New York football teams this week. So
haven't won yet.
I mean, hell, I'd start them both. If you're sticking me in a corner and making me pick, I'm probably like you going Myles Gaskin. I think he has a better shot at a big day against the Jets. The game is at home. It's not like New York teams and Northeast teams like going down there. So, as far as the Redskins are concerned, they're on the road going up against the Giants, who aren't great on defense, but I think a little bit better than the Jets. So, I'd probably go Gaskins this week. Like you said, Dynasty League. I mean, probably Gibson. But, if you're looking just for a start this week answer, I'm probably going Myles Gaskin.
Okay. That was questions. One was from Periscope, one was from YouTube. We also are on Twitch. Make sure you give us a follow, like, everything you can. Retweet the show.
Please. Yeah, absolutely. And we also, guys, will be looking at our Twitter account during the week, so please feel free to use the hashtag you see below, AskWTW. We're more than happy to get your questions answered here on the show. We'll actually, once we start getting enough of those in, we'll actually dedicate a whole segment to that at the end of the show. So, but Mike, speaking of dedication, let's get into the film room, buddy. Let's look at our usual unexpected and ugly Week 5 performances, and I will start this week. My usual performance, Adam Thielen. Death taxes and catches for Adam Thielen, my friend. 9 catches on 13 targets, 2 touchdowns for 80 yards. Mike, the Vikings aren't winning many football games, but they have produced the number 1 wide receiver and the number 2 running back in most standard formats through 5 weeks. So they're definitely putting up points. Kirk Cousins isn't the greatest quarterback in the world, but man, does he love him some Adam Thielen. In my opinion, one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. Obviously, fantasy value, he gets a ton of catches, so it's not like he's been an unknown or really anywhere, but specifically in fantasy for the last couple of years. But definitely my usual suspect. He's having a big year, like I said, number 1 ranked in most standard formats. Mike, we'll talk about another wide receiver for my unexpected. And if you told me you thought this guy was going to score 4 touchdowns on Sunday, I would have told you were drunken out of your mind. Yeah. And that's Chase Claypool, the wide receiver from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike, 7 catches on 11 targets for 110 yards, 3 touchdowns, also had 3 carries for 6 yards and a touchdown. Where in the hell did Chase Claypool come from, and who built him in a lab somewhere? Because this is ridiculous fantasy numbers, Mike, which I'm going to give it my overreaction alert as well. Don't expect this every week out of Chase Claypool. The Steelers have many weapons, as is evident just by their fantasy balance. Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Eric Ebron, all having solid years. Obviously, the running back carousel in Pittsburgh, it's kind of boom or bust depending on the week. But, Mike, the other thing is here, too, the Eagles stink. The Eagles are terrible. I mean, they're a shell of the team that won that Super Bowl a few years ago. And this defense was supposed to be the highlight of this team, and it's just not. There's been no highlights on this team, really. So definitely overreaction bunny year on Chase Claypool. I think in dynasty leagues, you're going to see a lot of pickups on him this week. But like I said, this team has a ton of young receiver talent, and my concern with him is this may have been a specific game plan that the Steelers put in this week, noticed a weakness that they could attack, and boy, did they attack it. But this is not something I expect every week out of Chase Claypool. But we'll talk a little more about that. And hell no, hell yeah.
Yes, we will.
And Mike, we talked about this a few minutes ago, the head coaching change in Atlanta, my ugly Matt Ryan this week. Boy, am I glad I traded him a few weeks ago in one of my leagues. 226 yards and an interception. Second week in a row, Mike, with 0 touchdowns for Matt Ryan. With all of those weapons, a big fat goose egg on touchdowns. So Dan Quinn's out. Like I said, maybe a culture shakeups in line for the locker room for these guys, and it might be just what the doctor ordered to get this offense back on track.
Yeah, so that's against that Panthers defense that had been giving up points to
a ton of
everybody,
points.
right?
Yep.
So then to go out and lay that egg, that one was truly disheartening. I really did not see that coming, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff, the stuff you see in Atlanta right now really is uncharacteristic, but man, is it worrisome for their fantasy value. Mike, who'd you have?
So my usual suspect here, I'm upgrading a rookie, Justin Herbert. Look, in 4 weeks that he has started, his lowest output was 18 points. So he's averaging 26.8 points, but more importantly, he's doing that against the 27th, 30th, 28th, and 7th worst teams to play against for fantasy quarterbacks. He had his most points against the Saints, who are the best, but the other three, if you have above, like if you're 18 to 20 something versus those, the 27th, 28th, and 30th, I am stoked about it. And then the other thing with him is they do get lucky here. We don't have to see a week where he plays without his star wide receiver, hopefully. Keenan Allen should get healthy with that adjusted schedule due to COVID schedule changes. Right. The thing that sucks about Keenan Allen, you are saying that way too often every year. This week he had 264 yards, 4 passing touchdowns against the Saints. He just seems to be consistent, and he can run with his legs. So if he's not throwing them in, he may run one in, and it's just a little extra couple points. So look, young Bucks earning his keep for me. My unexpected was Travis Fulgham. If anybody called this, you're a liar. I just don't believe you. Look, he's got an Old Dominion, a second-year pro. He blew it up. He had 10 receptions on 13 targets, 152 yards, including a touchdown. What I loved is that he didn't just make the easy plays. It wasn't like the Steelers were sitting back and letting him catch it in front of him. He ran some really nice routes. They were switching who was covering him. They did not have an answer in Pittsburgh, and that's a good secondary. But your situation matters. And honestly, Philly is way too inconsistent on offense for me this year. So he's not a guy that I'm like, oh, he's immediately into my lineup. If I have to, I'm flexing him this week. I think you do stash him, though. I think it's worth it just because he looks so good. The film will be out there. They'll start to pick up on some of his stuff. The defensive backs will watch the tape and learn him a little bit. So that's why I say you want to stash him, because as they get more and more, it'll be harder for him. And then the ugly, I'm going to my man, Uncle Phillip Rivers, man. He went against a still banged up Cleveland Browns secondary, and he goes out and lays a 5-point game. Look, Uncle Phil is moving into my crazy uncle category, and I just can't deal with that. That was ugly. I'm just out on that. Like, I'm not dealing with that anymore. I'm trying to get rid of him. If I had him, and if you had him, you should have gotten rid of him already. So he's my ugly pick.
And how crazy is it that we picked Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan as our ugly picks this week? Boy, how the times have changed, Mike.
Yeah, and people were so high. I mean, look, Matt Ryan going into the season with all those weapons, they'd upgraded that offensive line. Same with Phillip Rivers. He finally goes to a place where they have a great offensive line. It's not going to be about him being on his back, and he just isn't getting it done, at least in fantasy terms. They are winning most of their games so far. So,
yeah, well, Mike, the way we're going to help the Playmakers win every week is with our weekly locks going into week 6. And, Mike, my pick last week, I'm going to give myself a win for the week. So three wins for me out of 5 weeks. I'm not doing we didn't do the first week, so we're actually 3 wins out of 4 weeks. So I'm not doing too bad, my friend. CeeDee Lamb had 8 catches on 11 targets, 124 yards. Obviously, we all seen the horrific injury to Dak Prescott, so we'll see if this kind of production remains for him and Amari Cooper. That's something I would caution the Playmakers to really think hard about this week. You can give it a week to see how it goes, but Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, obviously not in dynasty leagues, but in year-to-year leagues, if you got somebody that's desperate for a wide receiver, you can leverage that. If you have some depth, I would look to leverage some of these wide receivers in Dallas just to see what's out there. Obviously, they're going to rely heavy on the run game. So Ezekiel Elliott owners, I won't say they're happy due to the injury, but they're definitely excited about the possibility of the production increasing, right? So,
yeah.
But like I said, CeeDee Lamb.
I'm higher on Andy Dalton. He was 9 of 11 when he came in. Yes, they were playing the Giants. I am not as afraid, so I like them still, but I do think you have to watch it with that grain of salt.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, Mike. You're in a 2-quarterback league, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Andy Dalton, obviously, standard 12-man leagues, probably not somebody you're going to pick up, right? But in a 2-quarterback league such as yourself,
would
you give him a shot?
would you rather have a guy like Matt Ryan who's struggling, or would you rather have Andy Dalton right now? Is kind of where I look at it. Like, there are some other matchups that I like more. Depends on what your situation is. I've never been like Andy Dalton was in a bad situation in Cincinnati the last few years. He had his star wide receiver was never healthy. He's never had this much talent in the wide receiver core. I'd say
period on offense.
I would agree.
He's never had this kind of talent, period, on offense. He's never had this kind of an offensive line. He's never had this kind of a running back. He's never had this kind of a wide receiver core in his career.
Yeah. I am actually thinking Andy Dalton's going to do just fine. I almost think that was why they signed him. I think the Joneses were like, look, we think he is pretty comparable. If something happens to Dak, we're going to be just fine. And we're going to find out here. So I actually really like Dalton coming in here for them. It just sucks how it had to happen.
Well, Mike, I'll give you my lock for this week. And this guy isn't our prototypical pick we make for our locks, guys. We usually try to tell you guys that are under the radar or a little bit under the top picks. Obviously, we're not going to tell you to start Christian McCaffrey every week because that should, when he's healthy, go without being said. But this guy, Mike, kind of flirts with that line. But here's the reason I'm going to give him to you as my lock this week is because he's not owned in 5% of leagues, which I found shocking considering he's top 10 in most standard formats.
Yeah. And
that's James Robinson, the running back from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has been the clear-cut number one guy since Leonard Fournette's departure, going against the Detroit Lions this week. And, boy, are they bad against the run, Mike. Over 170 yards per game. Like I said, he's emerged as the Jacksonville Jaguars' top guy on an offense that I think really – with all the talk this offseason about, rebuilding, tanking for Trevor Lawrence, going to get a new coach, I really think it pissed off this offense.
Yeah, they didn't get that memo.
Done pretty well. Yeah, they didn't get that memo. And, Mike, their offensive numbers have not been that bad. Guys like DJ Shark and Minshew himself have all had decent starts to the season. So, Mike, I'm going to give this pick with a caveat, my friend. Yeah. So I won't take a win on this because he's a top 10 guy unless he gives us at least 125 yards and a touchdown. I won't take a win on this.
So that's at least
but I am telling
19 points?
At least 100-ish, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not guaranteeing that, but I won't take a win for our account here for the year unless he has those numbers going into this week. Right. Mike, who's your...
All right, so my lock this week, I'm going with Alexander Madison. He's a running back for Minnesota Vikings. I had him stashed in several of my deeper leagues that are really tough. It really paid off. One, I had to start him. I had everyone go out with last-minute injuries. I got hurt so bad. So I actually played him this last week, and he really helped me with, 19, 20 points. Look, Cook is likely to sit this upcoming week. And Madison's only owned in 41% of the leagues. And the reason I say Cook's likely to sit is he had a groin injury, and then they go into a bye week. So they might as well get him fully healthy for the rest of the year, let him rest. And Madison is, I think, one of the top handcuffs. Tony Pollard is up there for me as well. So I think he is a guy. And this week, he had 20 touches, 112 yards, 3 receptions. So he's getting it done on the ground. He's getting some targets in the air. And that's just in relief. The other thing I want people to think about here is Dalvin Cook only needs 6 games to qualify for this season. He's one away?
Yep.
So if he comes back and plays one more, it's really lingering. Does he take a little heed from what he saw happen to Dak? This is something where I think minimally you've got to at least pick up Madison for this week and then store him. Stash him away if not, because I think he's going to flourish as like an RB1 this week. I love how much attention he's going to get from them. He is going to be the center of that offense this week.
No, and I love the pick, Mike. He ran all over the Seahawks, in relief of Dalvin Cook on Sunday night. And, as a Seahawks fan, I was like, what's going on here? Like, I expected this from Dalvin Cook, but from Alexander Madison?
Oh, yeah.
No, but you are right. He was the guy I had bunny-eared as one of my top handcuffs for the year. Guys like him, obviously Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, who's probably what I would say would be the top handcuff. You know what I mean? Top backup running back in the league, I think is easy.
I just thought they were a two-headed monster. I counted them as both not RB1s, but yeah.
That is a fair way to look at it. But I'm talking if we're strictly looking at a depth chart, right? Kareem probably goes Hunt and then those guys I just mentioned as far as, guys that are going to see the field a ton, right? So, I love that pick this week. And I think the Vikings, like you said, I think the Vikings look to spell Cook a little bit here these next few weeks. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like they're it's not like they're getting a whole lot done on defense. So why put this guy through hell?
Yeah.
They got an easy matchup this week coming up against the Falcons. So they could be up big here by halftime, and
Mm-hmm.
give Cook some rest. And like you said, run the ball second half. And Madison, did what he did to the Seahawks. So it's definitely not out of the question for him to do it to the Falcons. Michael, we got some sound to use this week, buddy. I'm jacked
Oh
up.
yeah.
Let's get into hell no, hell yeah, my friend.
Heck yes. I'm excited.
So, Mike, I'll start. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier in the show. Chase Claypool, massive day on Sunday with those 4 touchdowns. Hell no, hell yeah. Do you trust him as a viable fantasy football option moving forward?
Hell yeah. And this is where you said overreaction alert. If you think he's scoring 4 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns a week, you're out of your damn mind. But I did love it. 11 targets this week, and they were getting the ball to him on the ground. They're finding ways to get it to him. This is a guy who was an absolute, he just showed up at the combine and blew everyone's mind, right? His size, his speed, he has it all. And the Steelers are great at developing. And once they get somebody they think is better, let's look at AB. When they figured out that guy was the best damn route runner there was, how many times did they get the ball to his hands, right? He was great in space. This is a guy who I think it's not the same player as an AB type player, but he can make plays. He's just such a burner. And if you throw it up to him, he's 6'4". He's so athletic. His vert's ridiculous. I see him as a guy, even if he gets 5 targets, one or two of them are going to be in the red zone, right? If he gets 7, 8, 9 targets, he is likely to put in a touchdown. He's going to get you the 5, 6 receptions. Big Ben has come back with a vengeance. I think he's playing pretty damn well, and I think he's going to keep getting sharper. So I am going to trust him. If you're in a 10-team league, I'm not starting him this week. But if you're in the 12-team leagues, I think you can put him in your flex. I think they're going to look to get him the ball.
Okay. Well, Mike, I'm gonna put you on the spot here because Josh Allen ended up with not too bad of a stat line tonight. So
yeah, I gotta see how
he
ended up.
2 touchdowns and handful of yards, about 13 points in standard format. So, Mike, let me ask you this. It's going to be a 2-part question here. Josh Allen, looked human tonight, unlike he's looked for the first 4 weeks of the season against the Tennessee Titans, who, let's face it, haven't had the best passing defense in the league so far this season.
Mm-hmm.
Then we look at a guy like Derek Carr, who really is having a career resurgence, I'd say.
Yeah.
So, Mike, hell no, hell yeah, did this week change your mind on a few quarterbacks in the league like Josh Allen and Derek Carr?
Hell yeah. So I'm looking at Josh Allen. I'm a little more worried about his 2 matchups coming up as well. So he didn't do well against the 14th against the pass, the Tennessee Titans. He goes against the 27th worst matchup in the Chiefs, and then the 24th in the New York Jets. It's not that the Jets are bad. They're bad against it's hard for him to win. They suck so much that he just isn't going to be in the game long enough, right? They're so much better as a football team than the Jets. So it shows he is human. I'm not too concerned, though. The Titans just seem to have the right game plan to start. They were just going to pound the game, and they controlled it. I do see Josh Allen bounce back, but he's human. Some of his mistakes started to come out a little bit, but I think he's going to keep being a consistent quarterback, top few. Derek Carr, yes, absolutely. He looks great. And is it not? It feels like it's tied a little bit to Henry Ruggs, just being that playmaker. He could take the top off of defense. We always knew he could throw underneath. He loved to throw underneath over and over again. But having that guy that he can throw the ball deep, and he connected with him a few times this last week, 2 deep completions. So I'm more up on Derek Carr. That's the one that I really wanted to say the hell yeah for, because I'm just excited that he actually has that deep threat. Blake, I was going to ask you my questions next, but we have a question from Nick we're on Periscope here. He says James Conner or Kenyan this week. So I believe it's Kenyan Drake here.
Yeah, I looked at this when the question came in as you were still talking there, Mike.
Nice.
For me, I don't like how Kenyan Drake has played so far this season. But if you look at this strictly from a matchup perspective, James Conner's going against the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th best rush defense, believe it or not. Cleveland Browns, 6th best rushing defense heading into this week. And Kenyan Drake's going against the 4th worst. The Cowboys have given up almost 800 yards in rushing, averaging over 155 yards per game on the ground against them. So I think, without a doubt, I'm going Kenyan Drake, especially because I expect the Cardinals to win this game coming up. So, the Cowboys are still a good football team and still my pick to come out of that abysmal. I mean, if that division wasn't bad, look at it now with no Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
The Cowboys are a team that's stumbling. They took one on the chin, and they're stumbling back to their corner, and I think the Cardinals are going to take advantage of that this week. And like I said, fourth worst defense against the run, so I would definitely 100% give my stamp of approval on Kenyan Drake this week. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you, and the reason I agree with you also is I like the game flow, and that's something I always talk about. And with that positive game flow, Chase Edmonds is not going to steal all those targets from him. You're going to see where they're in positive running downs, and he's going to be on the field, and they actually might throw him a screen or dink and dunk it. And you're welcome, Nick. Thanks for the question.
Oh, yeah. Well, what are your questions for me, Mike? Hit me.
All right, let's get you going. So we have Devontae Adams. He should return this week. Hell no, hell yeah. Does he continue to average the most fantasy points per game for wide receivers?
So will Devontae Adams, just give me that one more time, the most fantasy points
per game.
The average.
Yes, the average. So he's averaged, 25 points per game, 24 points per game, and that's leading wide receivers so far this season. It's only in 2 games, I know that, but do you think he continues that this week?
This week, no, I don't believe so. They're going against the Bucs, who have been one of the better defenses going so far this season, I should say. And the other thing is, too, I think Aaron Rodgers has discovered that he has other toys to play with, right? So I don't know that kind of production is going to be sustained. So I guess my answer would be hell no.
All right.
Hell no, to the no, 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 hell to the no.
All right. We're going to swing over to another interesting one that he's somebody I owned and I thought would be a little bit better this year so far. Miles Sanders. Based on volume, he's been one of the top running backs this year. Volume, which is something I preach. If you're struggling or if you're trying to find somebody, those guys eventually, law of averages, are going to get in the ends and they're going to get their points. Blake, hell no, hell yeah. Do you trust him against the Ravens defense?
Hell yeah. And Mike, the reason I say that is Miles Sanders, believe it or not, despite having a quiet season, he's still ranked in the top 15 in most standard formats. So that would put him firmly in the running back 1, slightly into the running back 2, target range. The Ravens do have a good defense. This week is a tough matchup for them. But Mike, I truly believe if the Eagles want to get back to what they do best and what got them to the success they've had a couple years ago, is getting back to running the football. They've had some struggles, running the ball as far as, a game plan perspective. But I really think this week they will try to focus on that. And so and Miles Sanders is a good enough running back where I don't take him out of my roster or my lineup just based upon matchup, right? Because I find him to be one of those guys he's not at the level of an Ezekiel Elliott or a Christian McCaffrey, but he's at a high enough tier to where you start him every week. So my answer would be hell yes.
Yeah, and honestly, he looked electric. Like, there was times where he made guys look silly on that Steelers defense. Even on plays where he was losing a yard, he's making 1 or 2 guys miss. So I really do think he looks healthy. So I'm with you, and I think the volume is the key here. Yeah,
and that's the big thing too. People forget Miles Sanders missed a game this year. So without that one game in his back pocket, would he be top 10? I mean, who knows? Yeah. So. But, Mike, what I do know is the folks should go follow us over on Twitter at WTW_podcast. While you're there, folks, make sure you're following the BigPlay.com family of shows, BigPlay_com on Twitter. You'll find all of our great shows over there. Mondays, you have the Yacht Club, the Blitz Football Guys, obviously the Big Play Cleveland Reflow show with our Headman, Big Play Dave. Tuesdays, Birdland BS. Obviously, you have us here now moving forward on Tuesdays, Working the Wire, your weekly fantasy football show. Wednesdays, he just asked us the question in chat. Nick Padone has his show, Padone Might Take. That's on Wednesdays, and typically they put that around any Cleveland sports going on, so that does change a little bit here and there. But Thursdays, we got In the Backfield with our guy Peyton Hillis, and then the newbies. to the Big Play family. Voice of the Land on Sundays after the Cleveland Browns game. So, guys, please be sure to go give them all a follow. Check out the great content. Some other things in the works between Mike and myself that we'll maybe talk about here in a week or two once we get some more things ironed out. But definitely some exciting things going on over there. Be sure to give me a follow at Big Play Blake. Mike at Big Play Beats. Mike, anything else for the Playmakers on our first live show since, gosh, man, March?
Oh, it's been, yeah, I think it has been since March. Holy crap. We got a question from Rocky Waters. I was going to say, other than that, I was going to say no, just check us out. But is Baker expected to be completely healthy on Sunday? Based on his comment saying his mama didn't raise no wuss, I'm confident he's going to play against the Steelers. If he's your guy and you don't have somebody who is just a little further up, I think you got to play him, but I think you might be able to find a better streaming start. I think this is going to be a game where they run with ball control. I think they're going to try to really just pound it out and show them why they're going to use that top defensive line, and they're going to run the ball. So if you're wondering if you should play him, you might be able to find a better streaming start.
Yeah, and I agree with that take. I think Baker will be fine on Sunday. At this point in the season, Mike, we're, believe it or not, what are we we're over a third of the way through the season. Guys are all banged up. Yeah. Guys are all dealing with something. And especially this season with the shortened off-season programs and everything that we saw, guys are less conditioned. Guys are less in shape. It's that time of the year where everybody's dealing with something. It's just the level of severity. So, yeah. But with that said, Mike, great show, man. Welcome back to the live streaming. I think we're gonna have some fun, my friends. So, guys, like I said, please jump on Twitter. Feel free to use the hashtag AskWTW. Once we start getting a big flow of those questions in, we'll make sure we dedicate a whole segment to you, the Playmakers. But until then, good luck this week, and we'll catch you next time.